Good morning. Welcome to Chalice Unitarian Universalist Congregation. We are a community of diverse beliefs and experiences, nurturing the liberal religious spirit and united by our desire to grow in love and in service. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your life's journey, you are welcome here. Whether you gather with us every Sunday, once or twice a year, or are with us this morning for the first time, we are glad you are here. I'm Reverend Sharon Wiley, Chalice's minister. Our worship musician this morning is our music director, Tim McKnight. Welcome to this online worship service. Welcome to those of you watching live using Zoom, and welcome to you who are watching this recording of the service later. For those of us using Zoom, please notice on your menu that there's a button that says CC Live Transcript. This is Zoom's closed captioning service, and you can click on it to hide the subtitle if you don't want to see the words, or you can show the subtitle if you want that function on. Also on your menu is the chat button. For those of you who like to use the chat during the service, which you're welcome to do, please be sure that when you post, that you've used that little blue menu, that little drop-down menu to select panelists and attendees. If you only post to panelists, almost no one will see what you posted. It will come only to me, and I probably won't see it during the service. And we want everyone to be able to read and share posts together. So let's all give ourselves a big hug of hello and welcome. I want to especially welcome those of you who are newcomers at Chalice. Towards the end of the service, there will be a link in the chat box for adding your name to our email list. Our weekly email is the best way to get information about the many online groups and activities we are offering right now using Zoom. And if you're new to Chalice and would like to learn more about the congregation, you're invited to stay in this Zoom webinar space after the service ends, and we'll use the chat box for a newcomer chat. Now, let's take a breath together.
We acknowledge that our service is taking place on the stolen territory of the Kumeyaay, meaning humans or people, and the Payamkawishim, meaning Western people. A land acknowledgement works to undo the intentional erasure of Indigenous people and to support the resilience and strength that all Indigenous people have shown. We acknowledge the original inhabitants as a first and critical step toward learning and working with Indigenous communities to secure meaningful partnership and inclusion in the stewardship and protection of their cultural resources and sacred homeland.
Now we light our chalice, the symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. The flaming chalice was first used during World War II by the Unitarian Service Committee as a symbol of life-saving refuge for people fleeing persecution in Europe. May our chalice flame burn brightly, that all who are seeking may find us. words of our call to worship come from the Reverend Cynthia Landrum. Spirit of life and love, we gather together this morning from computer screens, from telephones, from car radios. We gather, reaching out across the wires, waving from a safe distance, to come together in religious community. From living room to front porch to car seat, we gather as we are able, ready to be of service to each other, to the world, ready to build the community of hope and love. As we face this bright morning, we are apart, but we are together, offering our love, our commitment, our hope, and our prayers in service to one another and this world. It is a new way and an old way that we come together in worship. Please join in singing.
Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are. Wonder, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. Come, come, whoever you are. Wonder, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again whoever you are. Wonder, worshipper, lover of leaving. Ours is no caravan of despair. Ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come.
Our Sunday worship is the shared spiritual practice of our community, and we tend to the congregation during this time by sharing our joys and sorrows. If you would like to share a joy or sorrow with the congregation this morning, now is the time for sharing in the chat box. If you would like to send me a confidential note about your joy or sorrow, including if you would like to request prayer, please email me and I'll put my email in the chat box. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is love. Such is love. All this joy. All this joy. All this sorrow. All this sorrow. All this hope. All this hope. All this pain. All this pain. Such is life. Such is life. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is love. Such is love. All this joy. All this joy. All this sorrow. All this sorrow. All this hope. All this hope. All this pain. Such is life. Such is life. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is peace. Such is love. Such is love. Our story is called A Terrible Thing Happened, written by Margaret M. Holmes and illustrated by Carrie Pillow. Sherman Smith saw the most terrible thing. He was very upset. It really scared Sherman to see such a terrible thing. Sherman did not like feeling so afraid. He did not want to remember what happened. So Sherman decided not to think about the terrible thing he saw. Sherman thought that would make him feel better. At first, the plan seemed to work. Sherman woke up every morning, he brushed his teeth, and he went to school. Sherman played with his friends. He teased his sister, and he walked his dog. Everything seemed all right for a while, but something inside of Sherman was starting to bother him. Sherman had to play more, run faster, and sing louder in order to forget the terrible thing he saw. Other things started happening to Sherman too. Sometimes he did not feel hungry. Sometimes his stomach hurt or his head hurt. Sometimes he felt sad, but he did not know why. Sometimes he was nervous for no reason at all. Sometimes he did not sleep very well. Sometimes when he did sleep, he had very bad dreams. The bad dreams scared Sherman. All of these things made Sherman angry. It seemed like Sherman was angry all the time. Sherman started getting in trouble at school. Sometimes he felt so angry he did mean things. Getting in trouble so often made Sherman feel bad. Sherman did not understand all of his bad feelings. He felt confused. Sometimes parents help children figure out their feelings. Sometimes teachers or other grown-ups help. That is how Sherman met Miss Maple. Ms. Maple helped Sherman think about his feelings. She listened while Sherman talked to her. They played while Sherman talked. Sherman did not feel as mixed up when he talked to Ms. Maple. Once, when Sherman and Ms. Maple were coloring, she told him to draw a picture of how he felt when he was angry. This seemed like a strange thing to draw, but Sherman did it. After that, Sherman drew lots of pictures of the pain in his stomach, pictures of the bad dreams he had, pictures of the fear he felt. And at last, pictures of the terrible thing he saw. Sherman and Ms. Maple talked about the pictures. He asked if the terrible thing he saw was his fault. Sherman said he worried a lot about that. No, Ms. Maple told Sherman, it was not your fault. Sherman told Ms. Maple a lot of things. He told her about the bad dreams. He told her how scared he felt. It was all very hard to do. Ms. Maple was proud that Sherman was trying to talk about such hard things. Sherman felt that it felt good to let his feelings out. Feeling good helped Sherman feel stronger. When Sherman felt stronger, he did not feel so angry. Nothing can change the terrible thing that Sherman saw, but now he does not feel so mean. He is not so scared or worried. His stomach does not hurt as much, and the bad dreams hardly ever happen. Sherman Smith is feeling much better now. He just thought you would want to know.
What up, everybody? It's Charlie and I'm back. So, over the last few weeks, I've been reading Resmaa Menakem's book, My Grandmother's Hands, which is about healing racialized trauma from the inside out using a body-conscious, psychology-tested approach. It's a really good book, and I would definitely recommend it to anybody who's interested in racialized trauma or different things like that. But in this video, I want to highlight one of the resources that Resmaa talks about in the book, what he calls the 5 anchors. So these 5 anchors are a way to sort of slow down your body and stay centered and present in a moment. And it's something that I've really needed lately, and I think would be helpful in not just racialized moments, but in times where you confront homophobia, transphobia, sexism, or any of those sort of negative, hateful ideologies. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing to do is to soothe yourself, to quiet your heart, settle your mind, and calm your body. Without being calm and settled yourself, you have no chance of settling someone else. So the first thing to do is to give yourself the space and time to be able to have that calm and peace about you. Some of the ways that I do this is by taking a drink of water or asking to go to the bathroom. Make sure you come back if you do that. But anything like that that will help to slow down the moment, give you space and time to move on to number 2, which is to notice the sensations and vibrations that are happening within you without reacting to them. This step is about noticing what's happening, giving a name to the feelings that you're having. Are you angry? Are you frustrated? Are you scared? Are you worried? Are you anxious? Putting a name to that feeling. Number 3 after that is to accept the discomfort and notice when it changes instead of trying to run from it. This one's important because you will have feelings and you will need to deal with them. And I know if you're anything like me, my first thought is to run from them and to make sure that I don't have to deal with them at all. But instead of running from them, if I lean into those feelings and accept them for what they are, I often find that those feelings end up changing and I don't have to run from them anymore. They can be something that gives me more clarity to figure out what I need to do next. That allows me to do number 4, which is to stay present in the moment and respond from the best parts of myself. This one's sort of self-explanatory, but it's probably one of the most important, to stay present in the moment and to respond from the best parts of yourself so that you never have to regret anything later. And number 5 is that after the confrontation has happened and after the moment has passed, to safely discharge any pent-up energy that you still have in you. Once you go through a fight, freeze, flee response, sometimes just going through that moment doesn't dispel all of the energy that you still have in you about that. for me, I always have to go and talk to somebody after, or I have to go exercise, or I have to go and do something to get out the excess energy that I have in me. Doing art helps, or something to just get it out, because that stuff will stick in your body and sort of build up and can lead to trauma if you don't safely dispel the energy that the situation has brought onto you. So those are what Resmaa calls the 5 anchors, and that's how I think that we can use them for all sorts of things outside of just racialized trauma. We can use them for homophobia, transphobia, sexism, racism, all of those negative, hateful attitudes, I think, can be confronted with these 5 anchors. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have anything to build onto them, I'd love to hear that. And I'll see you guys next time. Deuce.
So each church year, I pick a topic for a 10-part sermon series for us to study deeply together. And we call this our spirit study topic for the year. This year, we're working with the book you just heard about, My Grandmother's Hands, Racialized Trauma and the Pathway to Mending Our Hearts and Bodies, written by trauma specialist Resmaa Menakem. Today is the 7th sermon in this series. You can find my earlier sermons in this series on Chalice's YouTube channel. So one of the pleasures and strengths of learning from Resmaa Menakem is how often he describes recognizable events, actions, and activities, and gives us a new and useful framework for understanding them. Many of us have found it extremely useful to understand what he calls dirty pain, unmetabolized pain. We heard a description of this kind of pain in our story this morning. Did you recognize it? Sometimes Sherman did not feel hungry. Sometimes his stomach hurt or his head hurt. Sometimes he felt sad, but he did not know why. Sometimes he was nervous for no reason at all. Sometimes he did not sleep very well. Sometimes when he did sleep, he had very bad dreams. The bad dreams scared Sherman, and all of these things made Sherman angry. It seemed like Sherman was angry all the time. Sometimes he felt so angry he did mean things, and getting in trouble so often made Sherman feel bad. This is a simple description of what it is to live with unmetabolized pain. And the rest of the story was about how Sherman learns to process that pain, to metabolize it, to face it and work through it until he's feeling much better. A good story for our modern times. The central argument of Menakem's book is that the majority of people living in the United States live with unmetabolized, racialized trauma. This trauma may have been experienced directly through the use of video. We have all been witness to traumatizing events in recent years. And even if that weren't so, Menakem posits that trauma lives in the body and can be passed down through generations. And he's not the only one who makes that argument. His book is explicitly written for 3 audiences: white bodies, Black bodies, and police bodies. And his book is explicitly written in the hopes of helping us heal our unmetabolized, racialized trauma. Now, my last 2 sermons in this series have been about body practices we can do on our own to help ground and center our bodies, what Menakem calls settling our bodies, and knowing that settled bodies help settle other bodies. So there are also body practices we can do in community with others once the pandemic is over and we can gather together again. Body practices done with others help our bodies harmonize with one another, as Menakem puts it. And for those of us who are regular churchgoers, we recognize that when we gather in the same space together on Sunday morning, that practice of being in the chapel together, singing together, listening together, that practice is one that harmonizes our bodies. So those practices come before the most difficult section of the book in order to provide the reader with tools to comfort and ground ourselves as we face difficult work. Chapter 16 of the book is titled Mending the White Heart and Body. And it begins with an imaginary scenario that ends in imaginary violence. You, the reader, are asked to envision it. And then Menakem provides a series of reflection questions about that scenario. He advises taking a break from the book for at least a half hour and after this imaginary scenario. And during that time, that break, he advises the reader to employ body practices to help settle the body. I was deeply unsettled by this exercise and wondered if it was really okay for someone to ask us to imagine something terrible happening. You hear that I'm taking care not to tell you the imaginary scenario. But I also recognize that my discomfort was an expression of my own white fragility. I'm unsettled by imaginary violence that didn't really happen, while of course many people live with the reality of violence every day. And it seems to me an expression of, I'm trying to find the right words, but like how messed up we can get, that imaginary violence can seem deeply unsettling, and real violence then can bring an underreaction. Sometimes we see how many Black people have been killed in our country, and there's an under response from white communities. So in a previous sermon, I shared that Resmaa Menakem's advice to us about white fragility is to get over it, to understand ourselves as stronger and more resilient than we know. So I told myself to get over it and move on, and I did. So next, Menakem asks us to use our computers to go to the Wikipedia page for the 1920 lynchings in Duluth, Minnesota. And on that Wikipedia page is a photograph of a group of white men standing around the dead bodies of 3 Black men. And Menakem asks us to look at it closely. If that seems macabre to you, I need to let you know that that photo was made into a postcard that was sold as a memento. Images from many lynchings were made into postcards, and people collected them like baseball cards. The US Postal Service had banned the mailing of these cards in 1908, but they continued to be manufactured, sold, and collected as souvenirs. Now, Menakem does not invite us to study this as a piece of lost history. What he wants for us in this work is to study the photograph carefully while paying attention to the experience in our bodies. Where do we feel constriction? Where do we feel release? What else are we experiencing in our bodies? He walks us through a series of reflection questions to help us listen to our bodies and feel what we're feeling. He cautions that we might want to shut down and override what we're experiencing. I certainly recognize this. He cautions us not to fall for potentially soothing thoughts like, this is just history, or thank God people don't do this anymore, or this is just bad people doing bad things, or, well, white people in 1920 were somehow fundamentally different from you or me. He calls these kinds of messages a dodge we use to flee from our own pain. He tells us not to fall into this trap. The full exercise, as described in his book, might take a half hour or more to complete thoughtfully. One of the things he asks to imagine is that you lived in Duluth at this time and came upon this happening. And what do you think you would do? Menakem calls this chapter of his book the most important chapter for white readers, because in it, he encourages us to face what most of us white people have spent our entire lives trying not to see and not to know, which is the reality of white violence and the benefits that all white people enjoy as a result of the violence of white supremacy. So please hear me clearly. I am not saying, and Resmaa Menakem is definitely not saying, that all white people are perpetrators of violence. But when we look at a photo like the photo of these lynchings, 3 dead Black bodies surrounded by dozens of white bodies, and it's estimated that between 1,000 and 10,000 people participated in this violence. These white bodies who are proud to be photographed in this moment. When we look at this photo, we perpetuate our own trauma response by not facing this ugliness and owning that this kind of violence is somehow human. It is somehow part of all of us. This is what he writes about the photo. And I'll remind you that Resmaa Menakem is Black because it seems to me that he's very generous. This is what he writes about the white men in the photo. The white people posing in the photograph were born with human bodies just like yours and mine. They had the same physical, mental, and spiritual wiring that you and I do. But something happened to them and to their ancestors. That something enabled them to override the human body's normal reaction of shock, horror, terror, and disgust. What happened to the men in the lynching photo, and to many, many other men and women like them, was deep and persistent trauma. This trauma got transmitted and compounded through multiple generations. It began to look like culture, end quote. This, he notes, does not excuse their behavior. A history of trauma is a call to heal, not to harm. And I note that if we look away from the history of white violence in our country and refuse to face it, process it, to metabolize it, we risk becoming part of the ongoing perpetration of such violence. So my confession. I have recently realized that I have a long history of avoiding Black storytelling, movies in particular, because I know that almost always there will be some depiction of white violence, and I don't want to see it. It has been my white fragility and my white privilege that has allowed me to turn away from stories that center Black experience. So I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm going to use Resmaa Menakem's advice to listen to my body, to stay present to what I'm feeling and experiencing, and to use body practices to soothe myself and to settle my body. Menakem advises, the most important thing you can do to unravel white body supremacy and to heal your own historical and secondary trauma around race is to notice what your body does in the presence of an unfamiliar Black body, and then learn to settle your body in the midst of that presence. And he goes on, if you live in a place where you rarely encounter Black bodies, visit safe places where Black bodies congregate, such as African and Caribbean restaurants and boutiques, concerts by Black musicians, and book readings by Black authors. I would add that it is easier than it has ever been to read Black authors, watch films written and directed by Black filmmakers, and to enjoy music by Black musicians. Enjoying these things over the internet in our own homes does not accomplish Menakem's goal of having white bodies learn to settle in the presence of Black bodies. But for many people, it will help move Black experience from the margins to the center. And decentering whiteness is its own uncomfortable experience for many white people. And making ourselves uncomfortable gives us the opportunity to face and process that discomfort. Again, Menakem's words for white people: the most important thing you can do to unravel white body supremacy and to heal your own historical and secondary trauma around race is to notice what your body does in the presence of an unfamiliar Black body, and then learn to settle your body in the midst of that presence. This sounds deceptively simple, and I am guessing that it is not. I hope you will join me in committing to these practices and to this work. Please join in singing.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going?
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from?
Mystery,
What are we?
life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going?
Where do we come from?
Mystery,
What are we?
life is a
Where are
riddle
we
and a
going?
mystery.
The Sunday offering is an expression of the generosity that makes our congregational life possible. Today is a social justice Sunday when we donate our offering to a local organization that makes a difference in our larger community. This Sunday, we are taking a special collection for interfaith community services. We take a special collection every month, but I just want to name and lift up that we have a special relationship with Interfaith Community Services. Their offices are in Escondido. We have congregants who volunteer time there making meals. That's starting up again in person. And many of us have made personal commitments to donations to ICS. So here's some news about what they've been up to this past year.
In March 2020, everything changed. COVID-19 has impacted every aspect of our lives, and here at Interfaith Community Services, every program and service we offered has modified and shifted to continue to meet the needs of our neighbors during a time of global pandemic. Interfaith operates more than 50 programs and services, and almost every single one of them kept going throughout the crisis. There were a couple, like our senior minor home repair program, that had to pause but have now resumed. But with those few exceptions, we never stopped, and we've actually grown and had to increase the amount of services that we're providing in the community. After we got through the initial surge of April and May, this summer we began to pivot our services back to our deeper dive, helping people help themselves model. And we're providing intensive case management to thousands of families here in North County, helping individuals with employment, with housing, those who have had a hard time finding a way to pay rent while they're out of work. We're helping them to stay current. For those individuals who are without housing, we're helping them move back into housing and find new homes, all while our array of programs and services continue to operate. In the weeks after the start of COVID, we saw a more than 400% increase in the amount of people turning to us for help with food, shelter, and household items. The volunteers who normally provide these services, many of whom are over the age of 65 or have existing health conditions, were not able to serve and they had to stay home. Our staff here were on the front lines, and they're still on the front lines today, now with more volunteers having returned and a whole army of new volunteers having stepped up. There is no way we could have met the surge in demand for food and shelter without the tremendous support of this community. Our faith communities, our volunteers, our monetary donors, they stepped up in ways that we were totally blown away by. The sad reality is that we know the needs of our low-income neighbors are only beginning to be seen as a result of COVID. We know this is a long-haul recovery, that we are in the eye of the storm at best at this point, and we are going to need the support of the community to help our low-income neighbors as they pick themselves up and move forward during these really, really tough times. We want to thank all of you for your support. We could not have done this without you. And I call upon you to continue to walk with us, to continue this journey of working together to help with basic needs, employment, housing support, and all the things that a lot of people who are hurting right now are going to need a little support with in the months ahead.
There are two ways to donate. You can make a donation directly to Interfaith Community Services. You'll also hear us calling them ICS. I'm putting their donation link in the chat box. That way you can be added to their mailing list to get news directly from them. But if you prefer, you can text your donation to Chalice and we will forward the donations as coming from the congregation. So to indicate your donation is for this special offering, please text your dollar amount and the word justice, says this is a social justice collection. If your Sunday donation is part of your pledge payment, please be sure to indicate pledge after the dollar amount. Please give generously. Please join in dedicating our offering with words of affirmation. Open hearts, open minds, open doors, nurturing spirits, seeking justice within the wider world. This is our mission.
Art thou troubled? Music will calm thee. Art thou weary? Rest shall be thine. Rest shall be thine. Music, source of all gladness, heals thy sadness at her shrine. Music, music ever divine. Music, music calleth with voice divine. When the welcome spring is smiling, and the flowers of earth beguiling, after winter's weary rain, sweetest music doth attend her heavenly harmonies, doth lend her, chanting praises in her train, chanting praises in her train. Art thou troubled? Music will calm thee. Art thou weary? Rest shall be thine. Rest shall be thine. Music, source of all gladness, heals thy sadness at her shrine. Music, music ever divine. Music, music calleth with voice divine.
So there is also a chapter in Menakem's book on mending the Black heart and body, as well as one for the police heart and body. The teaching for Black people is much simpler because Black people in the United States have a long history of cultivating communal strength and resilience. Activities like group singing, drumming, rhythmic clapping, cooking, hugging, and touching, these are healing and harmonizing practices. One of the explicit messages Menakem has for Black people is to stop trying to make white people feel safe and comfortable. He writes, "You are not white people's one-stop comfort shop, nor is it your job to soothe white people whose lizard brain fears get activated by the color of your skin." His message for all of us: all adults need to learn how to soothe and anchor themselves rather than expect or demand that others soothe them. All adults need to heal and grow up. I love that. I'm probably going to hang it somewhere in my house to remind me. All adults need to heal and grow up. Earlier in the service, we heard a summary of Menakem's 5 anchors. These practices are for all of us to help us through times when our lizard brain is taking over and we need to calm ourselves and settle our bodies. Those anchors, again, to quiet yourself, to stop talking, calm down, remove yourself from the room. If you need to, get a glass of water, take off your sweater, open a window, anything to slow down what is happening. And of course, I think what most of us imagine is we're in some kind of verbal debate, fight, discussion. Second, listen to your body without reacting to it. Pay attention to what you're feeling. Is your heart racing? Are you sweating? Those same questions we're going to ask ourselves over and over. What's constricting? What's releasing? Third, to accept your discomfort without trying to flee from it. Remember those dodge messages. I have a feeling we have lots of those to tell ourselves. Accept our discomfort without trying to flee from it. Fourth, stay present to what's happening, responding from the best parts of yourself. It might take a while to access the best parts of yourself. So if you might need to go back and work your way through the steps again, quiet yourself, listen to your body, accept your discomfort, listen to, yeah. And then once you've been able to respond from the best parts of yourself, then 5, the 5th anchor, to safely discharge what energy remains. Physical activity is great, dancing, going for a walk, working in the yard. All adults need to learn how to soothe and anchor ourselves rather than expect that others soothe us, expect or demand. All adults need to heal and need to grow up. In Time magazine last month, Ibram X. Kendi wrote an article describing that we are living in a time of Black Renaissance. He describes this as, I'm quoting, "the third great cultural revival of Black Americans after the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, after the Black arts movements of the 1960s and 70s. Black creators today were nurtured by these past cultural revivals and all those brilliant creators who sustained Black arts during the 1980s and 90s. But if the Harlem Renaissance stirred Black people to see themselves," I'm still quoting, "if the Black arts movement stirred Black people to love themselves, then the Black Renaissance is stirring Black people to be themselves, totally, unapologetically, freely." End quote. I feel incredibly grateful for this Black Renaissance. It feels paradoxical, but maybe it's not. This is an amazing time to be alive. As Kendi describes this time, Black novelists, poets, filmmakers, producers, musicians, playwrights, artists, and writers got the white judge off our heads. I'm quoting him. We are no longer focused on making white people comfortable or uncomfortable. We also got the Black judge out of our heads. We refuse to carry the race on our shoulders. We are tired of being race representatives. We've escaped the shaming politics of respectability. We are showing that our Black lives have meaning and depth beyond white people. We are telling America to tone down its anti-Black racism and its sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, classism, and nativism, and all the ways those isms intersect, and all their violence. So we can live and be trans and cis and queer and disabled in the moonlight. Because, as Alicia, Patrice, and Opal put it, all Black lives matter. End quote. I'm sharing that with you this morning for inspiration. Read that article. Again, it was in Time. If you need a pick-me-up, a reminder that good things are happening, that whether white people to get it together or not, Black artists are flourishing, and we are all blessed by their gifts and creativity. And so I want to offer this suggestion. I think that no matter what your interests are, you can find Black perspectives on that hobby. So I Googled bird watching and Black authors, and I found a book called The Black and Brown Faces in America's Wild Places, African Americans Making Nature and the Environment a Part of Their Everyday Lives by Dudley Edmondson. I Googled knitting and Black authors and found a book called Black People Do Knit by Jeanette Sloan. Plenty of books about African American quilting, Black inventors and scientists, plenty of websites with information about Black chefs, Black bakers, Black electricians, Black architects, Black ballet, Black horseback riders. I have been watching the recent PBS docuseries about the Black church. So although our topic of healing trauma is a serious one, there is great joy available to us in taking this opportunity to learn about history and experiences that have been marginalized. Healing is a blessing. Let's get to work. Please join in singing.
For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. We are mothers of courage and fathers of time. We are daughters of dust and the sons of
Not everything we inherit is wanted. Not all legacies are blessings. Still, what has been left to us is ours, to face, to heal, to transform. That what we leave to the next generation may indeed be healing and transformation. And with those, the courage to continue on, building a world better than has come before. May we be blessed as we take on our work. Amen. You're invited to close our time together by singing the well. Newcomers are invited to stay here in the worship for a newcomer chat, and everyone is invited to our coffee hour.